If you're not up on Pokemon and Pokemon Go, well, you must be. It has become an obsession in just a month or 6 weeks or so. The phenomenon began back actually to the mid-1990s. And many are writing about this game phenomenon, and we'll explain it in the next 2 segments. And we'll give some serious warnings. Now, let me just say this before my co-hosts come on, because my frequent co-host Eric Barger wrote in his e-newsletter recently, in short, to play the game, users download the Pokemon Go app to their iPhone or Android phones, then they begin hunting down up to 150 different Pokemon creatures, capturing them in virtual reality. Pokemon Go is unlike any other game or fad we have seen because the game is based on a player's whereabouts, and users need to actually go to the particular locations to capture the virtual Pokemon. Various Pokemon appear on their screens as they hunt in places such as offices, schools, hospitals, businesses, parks, backyards, freeways. Going to add here even churches, everywhere and anywhere. Many users have been meeting together at key locations such as well-known landmarks in their quest to electronically gather Pokeballs. Okay, this probably sounds kind of weird to some of you, but that's a short introduction to the segment. Jill Martin-Rishi is in studio with me, as is Eric Barger. Jill, your take on this whole phenomenon?
Pokemon is a very dangerous thing in that it is based on a powerful story. We love stories, and stories actually have the power to transform our lives long term. And Pokemon is one long story. Unfortunately, it has so many elements of occult powers brought into it, and it's linked so strongly with the Japanese Shinto nature worship religion that there's a lot more beneath the surface than we see. It's not just a game.
Eric, you write, however, most players have no biblical understanding of just what they might be embracing. What are they embracing, in your opinion?
Well, with Pokemon, it may be more of an entry point, especially for younger people, although there are people in their 90s playing this game.
We're
reading,
right.
And we may report later on that. There's so many things to report here, folks. We're not going to get to all of it, but we want to aware you, especially you who don't know what this is or have any clue about it. We want you to be able to walk away with an understanding. But I believe this is an entry point because the company who developed Pokemon and who has marketed it, and there have been hundreds of millions of dollars in the Pokemon trademark itself, let alone Nintendo has now gone up $7 billion, billion with a B, $7 billion in value because of the release of Pokemon Go for phones and for iPads and so on. And I believe this is an entry because the world of the occult comes along in the form of other games that the same company has put out, such as, and some people will know some of these, Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering. And if you go to Walmart or go to one of the major, box stores and you go to the checkout stands, one of those checkout stands is dedicated right there at the side where you're standing, waiting in line, looking around, hoping they'll hurry to get the person ahead of you checked out. Right there next to you, you're going to find all these cards, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Digimon, which is another one. Digimon is like an entry point for teenagers. Pokemon is really the way into these things, and a lot of people without any value system won't realize what's happening. If people don't understand the biblical edict about the occult, they're going to walk right into these things. Yet Pokemon itself is full of occult and certainly mystic images.
Let me just play a real short sound bite. This is a kind of a news commentary about the game here.
A revolutionary smartphone game or a potentially lethal fad.
Yeah, the app is already soared to the top of the download charts and added. ABC2 News' Catherine Hawley found out what the popular game is all about today.
Pretty normal to see people with their heads down, buried in their cell phones. But these people aren't exactly being antisocial. They're playing a game.
But I've been trying to get out there religiously every day.
Getting out there to find things using their phones with unusual sounding names.
Pinsir, Krabby, Tangela,
Charmander, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle.
Rattata, Poliwag, Psyduck.
Welcome to the world of Pokemon Go. Users wander the neighborhood in search of Pokemon characters who pop up. The game pushes players to explore their outdoor surroundings as well as walk a lot. The app uses your phone's GPS and camera to bring you to real locations locations to collect items and spot Pokemon.
One of the reasons this game is so popular is because it's so interactive and you can actually capture Pokemon right in front of you.
Finally, to go catch Pokemon, and at least our world version of it is pretty awesome. I think all of us have always wanted to be a Pokemon master.
Yeah, it's just really immersive. Like I said, it gets you out here doing stuff. I just talk to a bunch of people on the path doing it.
Players say it's also forcing them to be more social outside of the game.
Okay, Jill and Eric, there are some listeners right now who aren't really tuned into technology for one reason or another. Maybe they don't have a smartphone. Maybe they're not familiar with what the smartphone can do, the fact that it has a camera, the fact that GPS can track these smartphones, etc. They're having a hard time grasping what are we talking about, and it's just because technology is passing everyone by.
Well, Pokemon stands for Pocket Monsters,
Yes.
and what these kids are doing, and now it's also branching up into the 20s, 30s, 40s, and like you
Exactly.
were saying, someone even 90s, in their 90s playing this. What they're doing is they're chasing around trying to capture on their phones these little pocket monsters. And then they take them and train them. They train them using supernatural gifts and powers. And so what Pokemon teaches is that the supernatural can be fun. And magic power is what Pokemon is all about. So without that, it would be a pretty dull game. And that's where the danger lies.
Something that strikes me, the idea that this is going to help us socially shows us how far down we've already gone. This made news. The senior center in Florida said they're encouraging those who have smartphones to play Pokemon Go because it will make them, first of all, keep their minds active, and secondly, give them exercise. So there's a justification going on. And one 92-year-old said she loves playing it because her mind does stay active. They're saying that it gets people outside. Well, it does more than that. What about the two men in California that I wrote about in the article, that they were playing Pokemon so intently they climbed over a fence that was up above the Pacific, up above a beach actually, and didn't realize that it wasn't stable ground. The ground gave way. One fell 50 feet and one fell 80 feet. One was unconscious. One was conscious when the lifeguards ran to help them. But that's the kind of stuff. We're hearing of broken ankles, broken legs, people falling in, face first, breaking their nose, this kind of thing as they're playing these games. And I'll give you two examples of things I saw in the last week. A young man about 16 or so walked into my front yard while my wife and I are out there gardening. Now, for me to be in the front yard gardening is first of all a miracle, but she's there often. And I basically said, "Excuse me, can we help you?" And he looked around startled, had no idea where he was. He was so I said, "Are you playing Pokemon Go?" And he said, "Yes." Last Sunday night, I was in a department store parking lot, and I'm sitting actually parked in my car, and I'd made a note on my phone ready to drive away. And I watched this take place. There's a lady standing in the middle of one of the lanes where traffic would drive through to find a parking place. There's cars coming from both directions. She's standing right in the middle of this lane looking at her phone. Nobody had beeped at her yet. And I watched this, and I knew exactly what was going on. If you're wondering why you're seeing more people look at their phones, they are seeing what their camera is seeing from their phone. In other words, they're seeing the lay of the land or the room or whatever in front of them. But they're also seeing Pokemon creatures or characters pop up from the game into their camera view, and then they've got to have enough Pokeballs to be able to capture the particular character that is there. And if they can capture the most powerful one and train him to do witchcraft and magic to be able to overcome others, they're going to be the winners or the top players of the game.
I want to build on what you've just described. I got an email from a listener, and I'd like to read it, and it expands a little bit on what you've just said. I have to leave the person's name and city off. She asked that I do that. And she just says, "I wanted to share an eye-opening experience with you. I own a shop in this particular city I can't name. It's located in a very pedestrian-friendly area and has huge front windows, needless to say. I don't miss much that happens on the sidewalks out front. Last week, I started to notice people stopping in front of one of my windows, staring down at their phones for several minutes, then walking on like zombies, unaware of anything around them. I didn't think much about it at first, since most people seem to be into their phones these days, but it eventually turned into literally hundreds of people throughout the day, young and old, stopping out front. Most business owners might see this as a good thing, but I personally found it distracting and mentioned it to a client." And goes on to say, "I told him that I assumed it had something to do with the game Pokemon Go. No one actually came into the shop, just stopped in front of it." Well, this person goes on to say, "The devil does like to reveal himself, doesn't he? The fellow in the chair just happens to play Pokemon Go and offered to check his phone for one of the creatures. Yes, there it was. He showed me the demonic Pokemonster and said that it was actually inside my shop. I took one look at it and recognized it as being quite demonic. The fellow explained that I can request that the creators of the game are willing to remove the creature if I want. I had a better plan. This person goes on to say, the next morning I went in early and I opened and took authority over the thing and cast it out of my shop. I also took authority in the name of Jesus over other creatures in the entire block and around the perimeter of the building, across the road, back through the alley, on and on. Guess what? Not even one person stopped anywhere near my shop to play Pokemon Go. That told me a lot about the demonic origins of the game. The body of Christ could shut down the entire game if they would just do this. Unfortunately, I think many are playing it instead. I have heard of these Pokemonsters in churches and even in people's homes. Just wanted to share that tidbit with you, Jan. Thanks for your programming. So again, we have churches that are actually, believe it or not, hundreds of churches, probably thousands across the country, all denominations, are embracing this Pokemon Go by making their church a Pokestop or a gym for the game. Jill, your thoughts?
Well, we were warned about this.
Yes.
We were warned about this. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities in this dark world. And these are things we cannot see. This Pokemon is a perfect example of that supernatural manifestation of evil. And if they can capture your attention, if they can hook you in with the bait of, oh, this is just a fun game, then they can take you even further. So we as Christians have a responsibility because of this warning. We wrestle not against flesh and blood.
And Eric, we've got the warning, and you give it in your book, and I'm going to refer to that in just a minute. We've got Deuteronomy 18, which has got 9 things that are warned against. Take that from your book, Entertaining Spirits Unaware.
Yeah, the 9 forbidden practices of the occult. There's a chapter on each one in the book, plus there's a chapter on Pokemon, and in the addendum that we did to update the book, we also updated about Yu-Gi-Oh! And about Pokemon and about some of the other of the cards that had come along and the games that had come along since then. Let me point something out to all you who are playing Pokemon Go out there. And there's got to be somebody who's listening right now who's been playing the game, and you're probably rolling your eyes and wondering where in the world these old-fashioned thinkers are coming from. What we want to do is stop you just for a second to get you to think about what is really going on here. If we can be desensitized about these kind of things in a virtual way, will it be much of a jump or leap to get us to accept them in a real way, or at least not to be startled by them and view them for what they are? And that, again, it's an entry point, as I've mentioned before. And I think we have to understand that if we don't believe that the demonic world is real, then what we do is say that we didn't believe Jesus was truthful in what he said to us. And today we have Christians who want to have it both ways, or people who are in church, I'll put it like that, who want to have it both ways. And by the way, some of the churches are embracing this and reaching out, thinking of some sort of an outreach.
Right,
that's like, let's go
exactly.
down to the bar, or let's go down to the topless nightclub, and we think that's an outreach. This is the craziest thing, that we think this is a good thing to reach out to the kids with this instead of warning them what's going on, what's really happening behind the scenes. A lot of churches have been marked as Pokestops by Nintendo itself, and without their knowledge and without their endorsement. So it's not that every church that might be a gym, that's GYM, a gym site where these Poke battles go on. They've not all endorsed it, but the White House, the Pentagon, the Holocaust Museum, the Auschwitz Memorial, these are places that are marked as Pokestops.